Shumai guys, welcome back to the Life to the Full podcast, the podcast that helps you make the most of your time here on Earth. I was back and forth recently with somebody on Threads. Somebody said, you shouldn't start a podcast with, "Hi guys, welcome back." And I thought, do you know what? I'll see what the Threadsverse says. And a lot of people agreed with me that actually it's kind of welcoming, kind of friendly when I listen to a podcast that welcomes me back. If I'm out on a walk or out to the gym, I feel like I'm there with the person. It kind of feels much more friendly. So I'm going to carry on doing it. Today on the show, I'd like to talk to you about a potentially controversial and provocative topic. Namely, you are a slave. I hope to at least have your attention with a statement like that, and I trust that you'll give me a short amount of your precious time to allow me to explain myself. I'd be hard-pushed to find anyone who would say publicly that slavery is a good thing. I don't think I'd have much more of a chance to find someone who'd say it in private either. It's clearly a morally reprehensible thing, and to deny that would seriously undermine your character. We would look at slavery in the past and modern-day slavery with disdain as a repugnant act to be condemned at all costs. I thought it would be interesting to ask ChatGPT, what are the arguments defending slavery? And it came up with some very weak arguments, which it countered without me even asking it to do so. It was like it was worried it was doing something wrong, and it didn't try very hard. I had to ask it 3 times to make an argument for slavery before it came up with anything close to a strong argument. And some of them might be of interest to us today, and we'll come back to them later in the show. Let's start with the dictionary definition of a slave, and by extension, what it means for us who, as far as I know, are not quite that. A slave is a person who is legally owned by someone else and has to work for that person and has no personal freedom. Or another definition from Merriam-Webster is someone, such as a factory worker or domestic labourer, who is coerced, often under threat of violence, to work for little or no pay. If we take the second half of that first statement and the second statement together, would any of us willingly describe us as truly free if we are obliged to work for someone else with no option to walk away? That is not freedom. That is bondage by another name. Do you feel like your pay is not enough? Are you coerced into going to work because the threat of violence from your mortgage company to make repayments to them, or from the government to pay them taxes? I don't want to come across as anti-work. I believe strongly that we are designed to work. We have an innate desire to create and to provide value to others. I am pro-work, but I'm pro making a conscious decision about what work you do, not out of coercion or having no choice and no freedom to choose what work you do. I would put it to you today that we are slaves to these 3 things. It may not be all of them, it may be 1 or 2, but it might be all 3. Here we go. We are slaves to money, status, and self. We are slaves to money, status, and self. Let's start with money. It should be self-evident, although not as obvious as it may seem if we look at some of the debt statistics from across the Western world, that if you are in debt, then you are a slave to the lender. Your work and efforts are not going towards your own situation, but rather your work and time and energy are going towards someone else's profits first. You don't have control over your money if you're in debt. The credit card company, or the mortgage company, or whoever you're indebted to, they legally own your life energy. Your personal freedom is extremely limited by carrying debt. But even if you're not in debt, we can still be slaves to money. One of the arguments that ChatGPT had for supporting slavery was, the institution of slavery allowed for the flourishing of an entire economic system, generating wealth, stability, and progress for millions. Even if some suffered, the overall benefit to society, increased productivity, access to cheap goods, cultural development, outweighed the harm. A few sacrificed for the many. Now this sounds to me remarkably similar to how some large companies would speak about their employees. We may not live in an industrial slavery environment, but we certainly live in an environment where people are forced to work long, hard hours for companies to generate wealth and progress for millions without feeling as if there's ever a way out. The vast majority of us spend more than half our waking hours at work to collect these tokens that we call pounds or dollars. We use almost all of our physical and mental energy working for someone else in order to be paid with money tokens. We may say we are free and we have our personal freedom, but what would happen if you decided that you weren't going to show up for work for a week? How long could you not go to work for before you started to suffer financially? How long would that freedom last? Are we not forced to go to our places by our employees, our places of work? Do they own your time when you're at work? Do they tell you what to do? Are you really as free as you think? We are literally trapped by a need to earn money to live. Freedom from slavery to money can look like financial independence, the ability to not work if you choose to do so, having enough income, producing assets to provide for your lifestyle, having freedom to tell a boss that you're not happy with the way you've been treated and that you're leaving. I've said it before on the podcast, financial independence isn't a particular number that when you reach it, it means you're free. Having 25x your annual expenses in assets that will return 6 to 8%, you can live off that forever, in theory. Although it's only a heuristic, it doesn't mean that you can't build freedom along the way. I've got a popular episode on the podcast called Use Money to Buy Freedom. It's episode 15, so why not head back and take a listen once you finish this episode. I want to develop this idea a little further. Yes, we are slaves to money because we have to work to earn it. Although, if you are full financially independent, I'd love to chat to you on the podcast, so get in touch. But also, we are slaves to money because we spend time thinking about it, worrying about it. It can control our thoughts. If you're in debt, it can consume even the time you should be resting with worry and anxiety. We can become obsessed by it. It can become our master. As we go on our journey of financial independence, we can make it so important that we keep going, accumulating. We keep the obsession going even after we've reached our end goal. Money can be the driving force behind all our decision making. So how do we break free? Firstly, if you're in debt, get out of debt. Decide that your debt is an emergency, like your house being on fire, and sort it out. Last week's episode was all about paying back debt. But if that's too much for you, you've got too much debt to handle on your own, you can get help. I've recommended CAP, which is a debt charity. It's called Christians Against Poverty. I've recommended them on the podcast and on my YouTube channel before. You don't have to be a Christian to go to them. They will just listen to you, help you understand how you got to where you are, and help you out of that situation. They can refinance some of your debts. They can collect them all together so that you're paying less back each month and you end up clearing your debt and you end up debt-free. So they are well worth getting in touch with. Secondly, you can start your financial independence journey. Start putting money aside and investing for your future. Start small and build up. Like I keep saying, the more you've got set aside for building your future, the more freedom you gain along the way. And then thirdly, give your money away. If you want a best antidote for releasing being a slave to money, is to give it away. I've never come across anyone who gives away 10% of their income who is in financial difficulty. You could argue that people who don't have financial difficulty are more easily able to give, but I would say it's the other way around. If you give out of your little, you will find that money comes back to you. If you are committed to giving away 10% of your income, I can guarantee you that you will be more conscious of your spending. You'll make sure that you're not wasting money in other areas. You'll realize even more the value of your money. But you'll also find that money loses its hold on you. You will see that money is just a number on a screen, and you'll begin to value things more highly. Treat money as the tool it is, and use it to bless others. The second thing that we are a slave to is we are slaves to status. The classic version of slavery to status is the flashy car, the fancy watch, the jet-setting lifestyle. I would suggest we are all playing the status game, whether we realize it or not. I'm actually thinking about this concept, expanding it into a whole episode. I used to be pretty proud of myself for being so smart and rejecting the status game of money. Cars, endless work hustle. I've always thought it was pretty dumb to chase those things. They'll never bring you happiness, is what I thought. So I was quite pleased with myself for stepping away from playing the status game. I thought, I'm not playing the status game. I didn't. I still don't actually think that those things were worth chasing. And basing your happiness and self-worth on them is a recipe for misery. That kind of worldly good promises much and massively underdelivers. But then I realized I was playing the status game, just a different iteration of the status game. Before we dive in to this section, I had a discussion with my wife last weekend as we went on a long hike in the North Downs without kids. My sister-in-law and her partner were happy to have the kids for a weekend, and we made the most of that by essentially going on what is the longest walk we've done in 10 years. It was great. Would recommend. 10 out of 10. We were talking with crossed wires for a while because she said that she thinks of status as being a mirage. It means looking to others as if you're better than you are, like the people she's worked with who have expensive TVs and clothes and gadgets to appear as if they have money, when in fact they are poor and living in debt. I explained that I see status as more of a concrete thing, which has real-world outworking. Think of being Prince William, or being the Dean of the University of Hong Kong. Both have real-world status, though, yes, you could argue that all status is perceived, and one can simply ignore the status. But the real-world status comes with real-world privileges. Both Prince William and the Dean of the University of Hong Kong can get in rooms that you and I would have no chance of getting in. In a sense, for the purposes of today's argument, we don't need to distinguish between the perceived status and the tangible status. In a world of fake it till you make it, one often precedes the other. It doesn't matter whether we're chasing status in order to look good to others, like flashing our Maldives holiday on Instagram, not my favourite form of status chasing, or chasing status so that we put ourselves in a superior worldly situation, like becoming a head teacher or working up a company hierarchy, arguably a more appropriate chasing of status. Whatever form of status we find ourselves chasing, we can oh so easily find ourselves slaves to chasing status. And it makes sense that we would want to chase status. Jordan Peterson argues that playing the status game is part of our evolutionary biology. He uses the example of hierarchy amongst lobsters. The most dominant lobsters get the best food, the best mates, the best dens, and so it's socially important for a lobster to know its position in the hierarchy. It's mostly to do with size, of course, so a smaller lobster will give way to a larger lobster because of the cost of fighting is too great. They could get injured or die, or even end up getting eaten by other lobsters. But when two or more evenly sized lobsters come up against each other, then they will fight, and whoever wins will get the best spot to live and hunt, and the best mate. Not only that, but they get a reputation among other lobsters that this guy is not to be messed with easily. Rightly or wrongly, we can see a similar pattern emerging in us humans. Those with the highest status get the best mates, the best houses, the best experience. It would seem natural and sensical to be status chasers. When I realized I was playing the status game, it was a wake-up call for me. My status that I was chasing was who could do the least work, who could only work 20 hours a week or 10 hours a week. My status is having a fit body. I say I don't care what other people think of me, but I still want them to say, oh, he's in good shape. Not just for his age, but in general, he's in great shape. I'm guilty of comparing myself to others and thinking, yeah, not bad actually. I'm in pretty good shape compared to them. I'm a slave to keeping up the appearances of the good life. What status game are you playing? Who's travelled to the most countries? Whose children are worst behaved? Who's got the biggest business? Who can run fastest? Who's got most leisure time? Who's got the most eco-friendly life? Who eats the least sugar? Who's got the best job title? Who's got most likes? Who's got the flashiest social media life? Any one of these, or an infinite number of other status games, can be played and they enslave us. They make us act like slaves and they control our actions. We can so easily find ourselves controlled by thoughts of others seeing us in a certain light, or thoughts of how to advance a career, or how I can get one up on my neighbour. We allow these things to be the things that control our thoughts and our actions, rather than giving up that people-pleasing attitude in order to pursue a life true to ourselves. When this happens, we are slaves to status. We are controlled by choosing status. How can we avoid being slaves to status? Recognize the futility of it all. You're very welcome to try to see how satisfying it is to appear wealthy but actually be poor, or try to show off how great your relationship is when it's crumbling under the surface, but you'll eventually realize that it's extremely dissatisfying. It is not life to the full. Learn from someone else's mistakes that chasing status with no substance is a pathway to misery. Even the extraordinarily wealthy, does anybody say that properly? Extraordinarily. Even the extraordinarily wealthy King Solomon in the Bible, who had actual real status and everything that could go with it, said, I said to myself, "Come now, I will test you with pleasure to find out what is good." But that also proved to be meaningless. "Laughter," I said, "is madness, and what does pleasure accomplish?" I tried cheering myself with wine and embracing folly, my mind still guiding me with wisdom. I wanted to see what was good for the people to do under the heavens during the few days of their lives. I undertook great projects. I built houses for myself and planted vineyards. I made gardens and parks and planted all kinds of fruit trees in them. I made reservoirs to water groves of flourishing trees. I bought male and female slaves and had other slaves who were born in my house. I also owned more herds and flocks than anyone in Jerusalem before me. I amassed silver and gold for myself, and the treasure of kings and provinces. I acquired male and female singers, and a harem as well, the delights of a man's heart. I became greater by far than anyone in Jerusalem before me. In all this my wisdom stayed with me. I denied myself nothing in my eyes desired. I refused my heart no pleasure. My heart took delight in all of my labour, and this was the reward for all my toil. Yet when I surveyed all that my hands had done, and what I had toiled to achieve, everything was meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Nothing was gained under the sun. That's from Ecclesiastes 2, 1-11. Here was a man who had all the gold and riches and food and women that his heart desired, and in the end, he says, it was meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Secondly, be content with what you have. The key to not being a slave to status is being satisfied and content with what you have. Practice gratitude. Don't just be content, but actively be grateful for what you do have. My wife has a gratitude note in her phone. I was going to say gratitude journal to sound fancy, but it's not actually a journal. It's just a note in a notes section, you know. And every day she writes what she's grateful for. It's a fantastic practice. Practice radical honesty about your situation. Don't pretend. Don't buy stuff to impress people. The harsh truth is, they don't care. Practice building other people up. Try building up someone else, even in a situation where you could be bigging yourself up. Tell people, "Oh, so-and-so is far better at bread baking than me. You should try some of his bread. It's so much better than mine." Use your own examples here, obviously. Practice putting people ahead of yourself. Similar to the above, but actively seek opportunities to put someone else forward for a job that you'd like, or providing food for someone and go hungry yourself. Give it a try. You might like it. Thirdly, we are slaves to self. Some of us are trapped in addictions to our phones, schedules, porn, whatever it is. If it controls us, we're not free. Our human nature is to desire things that are, quote, bad for us. We just keep going back to the things that we know we'll regret. Sometimes we can break these habits on our own, or with the help of a trusted friend, but sometimes it needs spiritual intervention. Being free from this kind of addiction is one step towards being free from slavery to self. But it's more than that. Unless we actively take steps to free ourselves from slavery to self, our own sense of importance can enslave us. Self-worship can be subtle. It shows up in our decision-making. Our decision making is so often through the lens of how it will benefit me. What am I doing on Thursday? Where am I going this weekend? What's my 5-year goal? None of these are bad in itself. It's wise to be thinking about these things. But if we only look at it through a set lens of self, that's slavery. Freedom doesn't mean doing whatever I want. Freedom is choosing your own limitations. If all our life energy goes into making my own life more comfortable, making my own life easier, maximizing my own potential, we are all slaves to self and not living life to the full. Lives that revolve completely around self are empty lives indeed. How can we stop being slaves to self? Serving others is the key to unburdening ourselves from slavery to self. There is no greater love than to lay down your life for your friends. There is nothing that breaks the power of ego like choosing someone else's good over your own comfort. By putting others first, we raise them up in importance, and as a consequence, we start to unshackle some of the chains of self. This comes more naturally to some than others. It's an area we can all grow in. Take some time after you finish this episode to think, and more importantly, put into action ways in which you actively seek to serve someone else, a spouse, a child, a colleague, a friend. We all have daily opportunities to say, I won't be ruled by self today. I will use my freedom to serve. It's my desire for this podcast that I can serve you, dear listener, whether you're from Llanelli or Frankfurt or Atlanta, Georgia, or anywhere else. I trust that you'll find blessing in this message and take action towards freedom. You know I can't finish without saying the most important freedom is spiritual freedom. And you can find out more about that from me at any time by heading to Instagram or Threads and shoot me a message on Life to the Full podcast. I am opening up some financial coaching slots, so shoot me an email, lifetothefullpodcast@gmail.com. If you've listened to episodes 12 through 16 of the podcast, and if you haven't, please do, it'll open your minds to a new way of thinking about money that you can't unsee. But if you listen to those and you're wondering where to start with thinking about money, investing, getting over the psychological hurdle of I need to do something else with my savings because I know keeping my money in cash is losing me money, then send me an email and we'll see if I'm a good fit for you. Until next time, peace out.